You know, just before my wife Carol passed away, I made her a promise I'd stick to come hell or high water. I'd build that oceanfront house she always dreamt of. So, after she was gone, I devoted every bit of my heart, soul, and yes, my wallet to putting that dream into motion for 2 years straight. Now, this $3 million place on the La Jolla coast wasn't just a house. It was a whole monument of memories and love stories. But no sooner had I settled into this new chapter, my son-in-law Damien decided he was going to treat it like his personal vacation pad. He showed up with a call and a laundry list of demands, figuring it was now party central for him and about 20 of his pals. Little did he know, I wasn't about to roll over. This 72-year-old engineer knows a thing or two about standing his ground. That day, the phone goes off as the sun's dipping just right, casting this soft golden light in the living room. I was in the leather armchair Carol had picked out, soaking in the calm as waves kissed the shore. When Damien's name popped up on the screen, I felt that all-too-familiar twinge of exhaustion creeping in. I went ahead and put him on speaker, old habit of mine to keep the hands free. "Listen up, old man," he starts, no pleasantries at all. "There's about 20 of us rolling in. Make sure the beds are set, towels ready, slippers, food, everything. We're crashing for 3 weeks." I stayed silent, gripping the chair's arms like they were my lifeline. His laundry list was like a hammer knocking my piece to pieces. 20 people for 3 straight weeks wasn't a visit. It was basically a takeover. And he had more to say, as if he were giving orders to a junior staffer. "We'll be there in 50 minutes, so get a move on, old man." The way he tossed "old man" at me, it stung, like a barb trying to rank me below him. I looked around and felt Carol's essence filling every corner of that room. Her sheet music still sat on the grand piano unplayed, just as she'd left it. I could see us dancing near the big glass doors during those breezy summer twilights. Her favorite painting of a stormy sea hung on the wall, the one we found in that quaint little gallery. Every inch of this house was filled with our history. And now Damien, who married my sweet daughter Olivia, was getting ready to flood in with his noisy, dismissive gang, aiming to turn this personal refuge into a party zone. Instead of anger, a calm resolve settled over me. It felt just like spotting a major error in blueprints back in my engineering days, the need to step in and rectify things before they went belly up. "Damien," I said, steady as a rock when I spoke, not giving away the storm inside. "Are you sure that's a bright idea?" "A bright idea? Hell yes," he chuckled, as if it was the easiest thing to grasp. "It's a family house, isn't it? You can't be planning to rattle around in that enormous place on your own. We'll bring some life to it." A silent, knowing smile briefly flitted across my face, the kind he couldn't see over the phone. The kind of life he imagined was not the kind I had in mind. "All right, Damien," I replied smoothly. "Come on over. I'll have things ready for you." I clicked the call off before he could launch into another spiel. I didn't have to yell. There was no need to move a muscle. I just let the stillness of the house wrap me up again. Damien missed the point entirely. All he saw in this house were its dollar signs, its expanse, its prime spot on the coast, the countless hours I'd spent with architects to get that perfect sunrise view from the master bedroom, just the way Carol imagined. It all flew over his head. Nor did he see the garden I'd filled with white roses and lavender in her memory. To him, I wasn't the guy who'd cherished her, walked her down the aisle. I was the hired help, the old man. For a second, my heart ached for Olivia. Such a sweet, gentle soul, but Damien rolled over her like a steamroller. She'd probably go along with him, afraid to challenge him, scared to stand up for her dad. My love for her wouldn't allow this kind of insult to slide. Carol was always my guide in matters of love and life, teaching that love needs its boundaries. Without them, you let others trample you like a doormat. And Damien, well, he just stepped over a very firm line that wasn't going to budge. Everything kicked off with pressure points and load-bearing walls, not with brick and stone, but with a plan. This plan, though, was a lesson blueprint, a lesson built on respect, meant to counter my own arrogance. As my joints gave a little crack, I stood up, determination giving me a chill. I went over to my desk, a solid piece of oak where I'd hashed out countless designs. Instead of calling Olivia to grovel or complaining to my lawyer, I took a different route. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through the contacts, and dialed Leo Management. The call was picked up on the first ring. "Leo Management, how can I help you, Mr. Miller?" The voice was efficient and to the point. "Hi, Leo," I said calmly. "I'm offering a unique rental case. High-end clients, utmost privacy required, and it starts tomorrow." There was a moment of surprise on the other end. "Tomorrow, Mr. Miller? That's unusually fast, but we'll handle it. Although our records note that you were expecting family." Leo was top-notch at his job, which is why I didn't mind the hefty fee for his services. They were private, meticulous, and competent. "Plans have changed," I shared briefly. "These clients have very specific needs. They want a peaceful, secure setting. I need a professional security team there around the clock, and absolutely no one not on the contract can step onto the property, not even family. Can you make that happen?" "Certainly, sir. We can have a bonded security team by dawn. Contract stipulations will be tightly enforced." "Great," I responded, planning to forward the renter's info and a few additional contract clauses soon. "I need everything set and legal by 8 a.m. tomorrow." "Consider it done, Mr. Miller. We'll handle it all." I hung up the call. That was the first move, and this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was a well-planned strategy, an emergency line I had drawn with my lawyer some months back. It was a legal fortress to protect Carol's legacy from the entitlement I saw sparking in Damien's eyes. Sitting at my computer, I started drafting an email to Leo. No triumphant cheer, no self-satisfaction, just a deep, calm sea. The calm of a seasoned engineer who's triple-checked the math and is confident the structure will weather the storm. Damien figured he was heading to a celebration, but in truth, he was walking into a meticulously planned lesson, and it was about to begin. Timely efficiency followed the call to Leo. I pictured 50 minutes ticking away in my head. Damien was like a storm on the horizon, and I needed to lock everything down. No panicking. Ask any good engineer, rushing spells disaster. I moved calmly, each action considered, like a man with a plan and a deadline. Next stop, the living room mantel, the soul of our home. Lined with silver frames, it told our story. I picked up the first frame, our wedding day captured in black and white. Carol laughed in it, head tilted back, her joy radiating through time. For a split second, I thought I heard her laughter in the quiet space. I remembered her whisper at the altar. "You're stuck with me now, Robert Miller." I grinned back at the memory. Best trouble I ever asked for. The warmth from that memory contrasted my cold, deliberate hands. I fetched bubble wrap and a box from the hall closet. Each photo was wrapped with care and placed in the box. Shots from our honeymoon in Italy. Olivia's first wobbly steps on this very floor. That last Christmas together before Carol became ill. Each frame was a world of love and memories, and I packed them away, bracing for a coming cold front. I then moved to her piano, an elegant baby grand, her gift from our 20th anniversary. Her fingers danced on those keys for years, filling our home with melodies of joy, sorrow, and life. As I brushed my hand over the polished wood, I almost sensed the echo of the last melody she played. It was Dussy's haunting notes, lingering as her goodbye. Despite her frailty, she played with her usual grace. I closed the piano lid gently, clicked the lock into place, and draped a hefty canvas cover over it. Now it sat quietly in the corner, a silent, shrouded presence. It was like its voice was hushed, its soul tucked away for now. Next, I turned my attention to our built-in bookshelves flanking the fireplace, crammed with the books we'd loved together. My aim wasn't to strip the house bare. I was focused on capturing its core. Scanning the shelves, my eyes drifted to the worn spines of treasured books. I picked up a volume of Robert Frost's poetry. Inside, Carol had scribbled a note in her elegant handwriting. It read, "My dearest Robert, thanks for choosing the road less traveled by. It has made all the difference. Love always, C." The familiar ache swelled as I closed the book. I packed it away with a dozen more, each carrying personal notes, books we once read aloud to each other on rainy days. The remaining books on the shelves, just for show. The shelf might seem full, but its heart was gone. With 3 boxes now capturing our shared life, I lugged them down to the basement. In the farthest corner of the finished area, behind a plain wooden door, my private retreat awaited. I tapped in a 7-digit code on the keypad, and the solid thunk of deadbolts was like music to my ears. Swinging open the tough steel door of my vault, a brainchild of mine made real when we built this place, a flood of memories returned. I vividly remembered standing on that empty lot with her, the ocean breeze playing with her hair. "It's wonderful, Robert. But what about the water? The storms? A flood could wash away everything. Our photos, Mom's jewelry." She had expressed her worries, and she was spot on. As an engineer, I couldn't deny the probabilities. Living near the coast meant storms were always lurking. So, I crafted a solution, a sturdy, over-engineered 10x10 FT room, reinforced concrete walls, humidity-controlled climate, a door strong enough for a Category 5 hurricane. "A storm cellar for our hearts," she said, eyes bright with relief and love. Now, the irony struck me. This vault, built to protect against nature's wrath, was now a haven from the storm of arrogance and disrespect, a storm from within the family. I gently placed the boxes on a metal shelf beside Carol's jewelry box and some cherished family mementos. One final glance, and I closed the door, hearing the reassuring click of the deadbolt. Carol was safe, but there was more work to be done. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, I stripped off the beautiful quilt Carol had spent a year quilting and replaced it with a stark white comforter. I did the same in the guest rooms, swapping the cozy beddings for bland hotel-style linens. It was the bathrooms next. I switched the soft matching towels and Carol's favored lavender soaps with scratchy white ones and unopened bars of generic soap. Every action was deliberate and careful. I was morphing the house, wiping away its soul. Bit by bit, I drained its heart, reverting it to simply walls and ceilings, not the warm refuge it once was. In the heart of the living room, I paused to take in the transformation. The clock gently reminded me that 48 minutes had passed. The room around me was devoid of personal touches, the photos packed away, the piano under wraps, the warmth securely stored downstairs. Now it could easily pass as a high-end rental, polished but empty, devoid of history. It was all just a perfect facade. Then I heard it, the distant rumbling of engines making their way up the gravel path. They were here. The tempest had arrived, and I, the engineer, was ready to face it. I was in my calm space, everything precisely arranged. Inside, more jobs awaited before Damien arrived. One critical piece of the plan still needed to be put into place. Right at 3 on the dot, a sleek black sedan pulled up outside. Evelyn Reed stepped out, my no-nonsense lawyer of 15 years with her sharp eyes. As soon as I'd had the talk with Leo, I'd reached out to her. She wasn't here to offer platitudes or small talk about the weather. She was here to finalize the strategy for the upcoming battle. I escorted her to my study, where a chunky binder full of papers lay ready on my desk. She gave me a look combining professional comprehension with steel determination. Robert, she said, each word coming out firm and clear, are you positive about going down this path? Once we get it rolling, there's no hitting reverse. I made sure to lock eyes with her, not flinching a bit. He called me an old man, Evelyn, and he's planning to wreck my wife's home. There's nothing else to mull over. Evelyn gave a nod, her expression switching from concern to all business mode. She took a seat across from me and cracked open the binder. All right, she said. Let's run through the plan one last time to ensure we've got everything locked down. She pointed to the first page titled, The Carroll Miller Family Trust. As we structured it 2 years ago, she began, slipping into her expert legal mode. This $3 million property isn't held by you, Robert Miller, the individual. It belongs to this trust, and you're the sole trustee. This is a massive legal point in our favor. I nodded, recalling how protecting the house from unexpected problems was my idea, but Evelyn had crafted it into an ironclad defense. Playing the role of trustee, she continued, comes with a fiduciary duty. Legally, you have to act for the trust's benefit, which means safeguarding its value and, where it fits, generating returns from it. Turning it into a 3-week, 30-person chaos party without a doubt breaches this duty. Legally speaking, you would be mishandling the trust's core asset. She paused to let that sink in before adding, on the flip side, leasing it to a well-screened, high-paying tenant for $120,000 perfectly aligns with fulfilling your fiduciary duty. Any judge would see this as a smart move by a trustee. The logic made absolute sense. This wasn't about just booting my son-in-law. I was simply doing what the law required of me. Nothing personal here, just business, and it was airtight. I flipped to the next page. And what about that occupancy rights clause? I asked, even though the answer was etched in my mind. Hearing it again helped fortify my plan. Evelyn allowed a small, satisfied smile to show. Ah, the crafty part, she said, pointing to a highlighted paragraph. This clause gives the beneficiaries, in this case your daughter Olivia, certain rights, like using the home, but only with your nod as trustee. I traced the words with my finger. What if Damien has a lawyer, who, let's say, is decent, and claims this clause means they can stay even without a lease? Exactly, I confirmed. Let's discuss that additional agreement. Evelyn reached into her sleek briefcase and produced a slim folder. She opened it to reveal a single sheet. This, she said almost softly, is what Olivia signed back then. The Gifted Funds and Asset Protection Agreement. I looked at it, the memory vivid. Olivia and Damien were brimming with excitement. I had just given them a $250,000 cashier's check for their first home's down payment. They promised to look after me in my later years. To make it official, and since I co-signed their mortgage, Evelyn drew up this standard agreement. It felt like a mere formality back then. Reading from it, Evelyn continued, the agreement states that in return for the substantial financial gift and the liability taken on as a co-signer, Olivia Miller willingly. That was almost insulting. She couldn't outsmart anyone, especially not me. But before I could react, she'd already put Damien on the line, who, with his typical arrogance, started listing off demands. Which room they wanted, what food to have, how they'd use my place like a shared space. As he rambled, I leaned back in my chair, feeling frustration bubbling up. This was more than just the house or the check now. It was about boundaries, ones they'd obviously forgotten. Evelyn's voice replayed in my mind. Actions have consequences. This was their reality check, a reminder my generosity wasn't a free pass to trample over everything Carroll and I had worked for. Cutting in, I stopped Damien mid-sentence. I'll see you when you get here, I said briskly, then hung up. There was no use bickering over the phone. They'd face the walls I built when they arrived. I sat there, knowing the showdown was bound to happen. I'd been hoping for a heart-to-heart, where my daughter would come to see how crucial it is to respect her heritage, her parents, and our home. But that wish seemed to be smothered by pride and the wrong crowd. As the moment neared, I couldn't help but think about how Carol always envisioned our family as a haven of warmth and peace. Protecting this place wasn't just about avoiding disorder. It was about safeguarding a home full of love and precious memories. With a deep breath, I readied myself mentally for the inevitable. This was about standing firm and finally imparting the lesson they'd been avoiding for too long. It felt like a hard dose of reality. They didn't seem to care about spending time with me. They just wanted to set their gathering against the backdrop of my home, drawn by its status. To them, I was just the bothersome host tied to their gratis holiday. "Olivia," I said, my voice carrying more weight, "this home runs on rules. My rules. Ones that honor your mother's memory. Do you and Damien even understand that this was her last chance to see the value of what she stood to lose? This isn't optional." She couldn't grasp it, or didn't want to. Maintaining harmony with her husband seemed more important than acknowledging her father. "Oh, whatever, Dad. Sure, rules. We'll behave. Look, I gotta go. Damien's ringing me. We're almost there. Catch you soon." Just like that, she ended the call. No "I love you." No recognition of my point. Just whatever. That one dismissive word felt like a door slamming shut. It was her choice, not me. I put the phone down, and whatever tiny hope I'd been unknowingly clutching evaporated. A peculiar calm settled over me. There was still sorrow for the brave little girl she once was, but no more guilt or doubts. I had warned her, given her a way out. She brushed it off with a careless whatever. She chose her path, and now she and her husband would have to navigate it, and I, the seasoned engineer, had crafted every precise element of it, unwavering in its complexity. The doorbell's insistent ring cut through the quiet, demanding attention. The storm had made landfall. As I walked to the foyer, the doorbell blared again, impatient and loud. Before I could react, the door swung open, crashing against the wall, leaving its mark. Damien stood there, silhouetted by the afternoon light, not with luggage, but with a sizable red cooler. His grin felt more like a challenge than a greeting, and his booming voice filled the house. "All right, old man, the party's here," echoing off the high ceilings. He strutted in, not even bothering to wipe his shoes, slapping my shoulder as if laying claim rather than saying hello. "Ready for us? Where should we set up the bar?" he quipped. A torrent of people followed him inside, not the 20 I'd prepped for, but more like 30. My quick glance, honed by years as an engineer, confirmed it. The group was a rambunctious mix of young folks, all noisy and jocular, lugging bags and cases of beer like they were on spring break. The serene coastal quiet I loved was obliterated, overtaken by a chaotic symphony of shouting, cheers, and the relentless thump of a portable speaker carelessly placed on my custom entry table. One guy, cap backwards, whistled low. "Damn, Damien," he shouted over the noise. "You weren't lying. Your father-in-law's stacked. This place is seriously epic." Damien only chuckled, ownership dripping from his voice. "Told you. Welcome to my summer digs. My summer home." Those words floated around like an oily cloud of entitlement. I said nothing. I stood firm, unyielding amidst their wild storm. I watched as they tossed their bags with indifference onto my cherished hardwood floors, the zippers scraping the surface I'd polished by hand. A young woman flopped onto the white linen sofa, her sandy flip-flops resting thoughtlessly on the custom coffee table. Another group swarmed into the kitchen, flinging open the fridge as if it were a free-for-all. A loud voice rang out, "He's got beer!" And soon after, the sound of cans popping open filled the air. These people weren't guests. They were like a swarm of locusts, devouring everything around them without a second thought. At the back of this unruly group, Olivia came in looking small and somewhat lost, with an anxious grin plastered on her face. She pressed herself into the corner, looked my way for a second, looking almost guilty. "Dad," she began, but before she could finish, Damien's voice boomed from the other room. "Liv, you gotta see this view." She threw a look my way that said she had no other option, and left to join him. Her apology, half-spoken, vanished in the noisy chaos. I wasn't angry with her, just deeply disappointed to see her part of this destruction of her childhood memories. I found myself just watching the scene like a scientist observing an ant farm, noting their complete disregard for my home. Damien strutted over, asking which bedrooms were best, and I vaguely directed him toward the stairs. No sooner had I done that than his friends rushed up, claiming rooms with loud cries of, "This one's mine," and "Wow, check out the bathroom." It was like they were conquistadors claiming new territory. My safe haven now belonged to strangers. Pretty soon, Damien was at the top of the stairs with a cocky smile. "Hey, old man," he yelled. "I'm taking the master. The view's killer. You good with that?" He didn't wait for my reply, and vanished into what used to be Carol's and my room, a place full of peaceful moments and her love for the ocean. He'd sleep there tonight, but instead of fury, a hard resolve settled in me. Every loud noise, every bit of trash they left added layers to my determination. They weren't just in my house. They were trampling over Carol's memory. Oddly enough, amidst this chaos, I felt a calm certainty, as if everything was coming together according to plan. They thought they'd conquered the place, totally unaware they were locking themselves in a trap I had set. Their facade cracked with just a small inconvenience they experienced that night. After people grabbed spots and had a few too many beers, Damien decided to pump up the music, strutting over to the expensive sound system I'd put in, enough to make the whole place shake with music. He bragged about it. "You folks are in for a treat," he said. "The old man spent big on this setup." He fiddled with the controls, a look of confusion slipping onto his face. Nothing happened. He tried once more. Still nothing. A lanky friend teased, "Stuck, Damien? Need to call tech support?" Damien's jaw tightened. "Shut up. It's just a setting." After 20 frustrating minutes, he tried syncing his phone, the Wi-Fi, even a streaming account, but the system, reconfigured by me earlier, wouldn't work. It saw the network but refused to connect. It detected his phone but didn't sync. It was the ultimate tech frustration. When he finally gave up, they relied on the tinny sound from a portable speaker they had brought. Meanwhile, the $5,000 sound system remained silent, a standing reminder of their failure. Damien shot me a dirty look. Relaxing in my favorite armchair with an old book, I just gave a helpless shrug. "Oh, that fancy setup. Never could figure it out myself. Bit much for me." The next snag was the Wi-Fi. In today's world, nothing's more exasperating than slow internet. Before anyone arrived, I'd tweaked the settings on the router to throttle the speed. Signal was strong, all bars lit, but the web felt like it was crawling at a snail's pace. All around the house, the terrible internet had everyone on edge. People were shaking their heads at screens that wouldn't load a single video. Trying to watch a movie on that massive 8K TV was a lost cause. Even scrolling through social media turned into an agonizing wait, with the dreaded buffering symbol always reappearing. I observed these tech-savvy kids as they were thrown back into what felt like the Stone Age of technology. They were all glued to their phones, the glow from the screens casting a pale light on their faces. It was like watching kids struggle with a fancy toy that came with no instructions and dead batteries. This beautiful house might as well have been a luxurious prison given the awful reception. As the evening wore on, the complaints grew louder. Despite there being 6 full bathrooms, showers saw longer lines than expected. But trust me, they moved quicker than you'd think. I had a hand in that. Earlier on, I snuck down to the basement to lower the temperature on the massive 80-gallon water heater. Not frigid, just lukewarm enough. After 4 or 5 folks, the water turned unpleasantly chilly. This prompted surprised shouts and cries of frustration to echo from the upstairs bathrooms. "Does this place even have hot water?" someone shouted. Damen, tangled in an HDMI cable and battling to connect a game console to a disagreeable smart TV, signaled his defeat by throwing up his hands. "How should I know?" he said wryly. "Maybe the old man's looking to save on the gas bill." Then come morning, a hungover gaggle faced newfound woes. Hangovers call for 2 key things: coffee and greasy food. I made sure they'd have a hard time getting both. The fancy Italian espresso machine, usually perfect for a prime cappuccino, taunted them with a flashing red light, demanding a descale cycle. I'd hidden the cleaning solution, of course. All they were left with was a cheap drip coffee maker and a tin of run-of-the-mill coffee. Their faces puckered when they took that first sip of bitter, lackluster coffee, my silent triumph for the day. As for the swanky induction stove, it refused to cooperate with greasy fingers frantically swiping its touch controls. As for me, I was the calm amid this storm. While they tussled with the coffee maker, I was outside on the patio, serenely enjoying a cup of tea brewed on a simple hot plate. As they cursed at their phones spinning with the never-ending buffering wheel, I immersed myself in a book, relishing the soft sound of each page I turned. My old-school serenity was like night and day against their digital frustration. Whenever they came to me to complain, I'd offer the most clueless, grandfatherly advice. Trouble with the Wi-Fi? Maybe give it a good old restart. The stove? Sometimes it can be fussy about which pan to use. Playing the clueless elder was my game. I was like an unseen force in their lives, subtly sowing chaos without being detected. Damen's frustration was mounting, and I kept adding fuel to the flame. He had hoped this party would be his big moment, but instead, he couldn't give his friends the luxe experience he had promised. His friends started teasing him, their jokes cutting a bit deeper each time. "Some mansion you have here," one sneered, wrestling with a blackened toast. "Even my dorms got better Wi-Fi." Damen's face flushed with anger and embarrassment, his fragile ego taking a beating. The house, intended to be his crowning jewel, was quickly becoming the butt of every joke. In a huff, Damen pushed his chair back, its legs scraping loudly against the floor. He was on a mission to take back control, desperate to find something in that house that would actually cooperate. As he swept through the living room, frustration etched in every line of his face, I knew we were about to hit a breaking point. The tension in the house, though not explosive, was definitely cracking, like a silent earthquake. By late morning, irritation buzzed throughout the house, amplified by the mix of boredom and cheap beer. Some of Damen's friends, including the sarcastic one with the cap, decided throwing a foam football was a good idea. The throws grew more erratic and wild. Olivia tried to caution, "Guys, maybe this isn't the best place," but her warning was lost amidst the escalating chaos. I stood by the big window, seemingly captivated by the sea view, all the while monitoring everything via the glass's reflection. The football arced through the air, going way off the planned path. One of the guys tried to catch it, missed, and it slipped right through his fingers, heading straight for the fireplace mantel. Suddenly, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Though the foam ball was soft, it had just enough heft to knock against the edge of a small ceramic statue I had set up there. This wasn't some expensive antique or anything valuable money-wise, but to me, it was the most priceless thing in our place. It teetered for a moment, like a tiny, unsteady bird about to make a doomed leap. Then, it plunged. The soft clink it made as it shattered on the stone hearth wasn't loud, but it cut through the room's noise like a sharp blade, instantly silencing us. Their laughter stopped dead. Everyone's eyes were glued to the colorful pieces scattered across the hearth. The guy who threw the ball turned pale, eyes wide, mouth hanging open in shock. Deep down, he knew he'd damaged more than just a decoration. If I had to explain what that statue meant, I'd have to dig deep into my feelings. It was the one and only pottery piece my wife, Carol, ever created. I remembered her coming home from her new art class, hands still crusted with dried clay, a smudge on her cheek, but her eyes shining with the pride of accomplishing something like a child would. "It's kind of wonky, isn't it?" she laughed, highlighting the uneven glaze. "But look, Robert, I made it myself." It was beautifully flawed, a testament to her brave spirit, her readiness to try something new late in life. Holding it felt like cradling a piece of her joy. Turning away from the window, the room seemed heavy with silence and unspoken regret. Their eyes were on me, as if hoping Damien, their self-proclaimed leader, would step up and handle things. This was Damien's moment to own up, apologize sincerely, and show a hint of human decency. But, in typical Damien fashion, he didn't seize that chance. Owning up would have meant admitting he wasn't in control in front of his friends. His pride couldn't take it. Instead, he shattered the intense silence with an irritating laugh, brushing off the matter entirely. He strutted over to where the pieces lay, giving a larger shard a nudge with his fancy sneaker. Smirking in a way that made my anger boil, he said, "Oh, come on. It's just a lump of clay, old man." He laughed again, trying to turn the heavy moment into a joke. "Relax. I'll buy you 10 more of these." At that instant, something switched inside me. It wasn't just about a piece of pottery being broken. His words stabbed harshly at the memories it held. He looked at this piece of my wife's essence, her happiness, her effort, and dismissed its value. He called it just clay. Right there, Damien wasn't just my obnoxious son-in-law. He was like a vandal in a sacred place. I didn't yell or get heated. I didn't say a word. I just fixed my eyes on him with a calm that I hoped made him uneasy. I held his gaze for a long moment, waiting. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. He thought I was going to explode. My quietness disturbed him. After that, I turned my back on him and all of them, heading purposefully to my study. "Hey," Damien called, sounding less sure now. "Hey, don't overreact." I didn't answer. I didn't look back. I gently closed the study door behind me. The observing was over. It was time for consequences. That night, I got into bed, but rest wouldn't come. I lay there in the guest room, catching every last sound of my home being completely disrespected. The party finally fizzled out as dawn broke, leaving behind the chorus of drunken snores from various rooms. When the sun peeked over the horizon, I was already up, showered, and dressed. I took my spot on the back patio, sipping my tea and watching the waves as I waited. Behind me, the house was a mess, resembling the aftermath of a wild night. The living room was a sea of empty pizza boxes, and those red plastic cups littered everywhere, some still with a nauseating mix of beer and cigarette butts. A sticky substance was drying on the floor near the kitchen, while a lone, sad sock dangled from a lampshade. Around 9 a.m., one of Damien's friends staggered out of a bedroom. A bleary-eyed young man sporting only crumpled basketball shorts. He grunted, scratched his belly, and shuffled toward the kitchen, likely hoping the guy was trying to shake off his hangover fog and was heading for some water, but stopped right in his tracks at the sight before him. Standing amidst the chaos of the living room were 4 strangers who totally didn't belong there. There was a man, a woman, and their 2 kids, all dressed to the nines. The man, Mr. Tanaka, looked sharp in perfectly pressed trousers and a white shirt, while his wife wore a stylish sundress. Their kids, a boy and a girl, stood quietly, looking like they had just walked out of a fashion magazine. Then there was Leo, my property manager, looking quite dapper himself in a navy suit with a leather portfolio. It was like someone had taken a picture from a fancy magazine and plunked it down in the middle of a pigsty. The contrast was shocking, almost unreal. The Tanaka family was looking around at the mess, but they weren't all grossed out or anything. They seemed pretty calm and detached about the whole thing. Mr. Tanaka scanned the piles of junk without a flicker of emotion on his face. Mrs. Tanaka, spotting the guy gawking at them, gave a polite little smile and a small nod. It was such a serene gesture, it seemed to short-circuit the poor guy's brain. He just stood there, totally stunned. Slowly, more of the hungover crowd started coming out from the bedrooms, lured by the strange quiet. As each one stumbled out, they saw the mess, the poised family in it, and just stopped, looking utterly confused. The usual morning moaning turned into hushed, frantic whispers like, "Who are they? Are they the old man's kin? Why are they all dolled up?" The room was thick with a weird, quiet tension and unasked questions. The party guests, who'd been so full of themselves just hours before, now seemed like the unwelcome intruders they probably were. They huddled into uncertain little groups, their swagger gone. Meanwhile, the Tanakas paid no mind. With Leo in tow, they slowly checked out the main floor. They talked to each other softly in fluent Japanese, their words gentle murmurs in the stunned silence. Mr. Tanaka nodded approvingly at the view from the big windows, and Mrs. Tanaka lightly brushed her fingers over the kitchen's marble countertop, careful to dodge a sticky soda spill. Their quiet civility was like an alien force in the chaos, so out of place that it threw everyone off guard. They weren't just random visitors. They were sizing everything up, and just being there was a kind of judgment on the mess. After about 10 minutes of this odd standoff, the ringleader of the chaos finally showed up. Damien strolled down the stairs, yawning and stretching like he was expecting applause from his pals. But instead, he walked into a room full of tense, confused faces, all staring at the strangers near the kitchen. When his eyes followed theirs, his look of smugness quickly turned into simmering anger. His face hardened, and he made a heavy-footed descent the rest of the way. Damien puffed out his chest, trying to make some power play as he stood in the path of Leo and the Tanakas. The room felt like the silence was stretched nearly to the breaking point. "Who on earth are you folks?" he barked, his voice a low, menacing growl. "And what gives you the right to be in my father-in-law's house?" His challenge hung heavily in the air, his hostility rallying his buddies, who had been standing there unsure. Damien was trying to claim control back as the dominant leader. Mr. Tanaka remained unruffled, with a calm, unreadable look. Before I could step in, Leo jumped ahead, positioning himself between Damien and the Tanaka family. He exuded this cool, professional demeanor that made Damien's bluster look like a kid having a tantrum. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," Leo said smoothly, his voice steady and sure. "I'm Leo from Leo Management, and may I introduce Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka and their children?" He gestured courteously to the family. Damien scoffed, sounding bitter and harsh. "I don't give a damn who you are. I want to know what you're doing here. This is supposed to be a private family retreat, so I suggest you round up your crew and get the hell out." Leo kept a straight face, totally unfazed. "I believe there's a bit of a mix-up here," he said, cool as a cucumber. "This isn't just some open house. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka are actually renting this place temporarily." The mention of tenants landed like a bombshell. Damien stood there, briefly thrown for a loop. Then he let out this over-the-top laugh, all loud and forced, like he wanted to reassure his pals he was still calling the shots. "Tenants? Are you serious? Tenants? This is my family's property, idiot. My dad invited us over himself." He gestured angrily towards me. "So why don't you take your bogus paperwork and fake family and scram before I get the authorities involved? Leo remained completely composed. He unclasped the portfolio he was holding. All this paperwork is very real, Mr. Carter, he noted, unfazed, pulling out a hefty pile of legal documents. This here is a freshly signed rental agreement from today. The Tanaka family has leased the home for 3 weeks at a price of $120,000. That number hit the room like a knockout punch. $120,000. Damien's crew started whispering among themselves, and the mood in the room switched up immediately. This wasn't just a blunder anymore. It was for real. Damien's face turned an angry shade of red, his laughter fading and replaced by disbelief and fury. He glared at me with daggers in his eyes. "You," he snarled, trembling with rage, "set this whole thing up to kick us out after you supposedly invited us." This was my chance. Leo had laid out the truth, and it was my job to follow through. I stepped up, a calm presence amid Damien's angry storm. "I'm not booting you out, Damien," I said, my voice steady yet firm. "You were never really asked here. You jumped to conclusions on your own." He blinked at me, speechless like a fish gasping for air. "You think this is my house," I explained further, leaving him puzzled. "Isn't it yours? What kind of trickery is this?" he scoffed. "No trick involved," I clarified. "This home isn't mine per se. It's under the Carroll Miller Family Trust." Damien was baffled by the legal talk. Fiduciary duties, trusteeship, assets. This wasn't his playing field of rough and tough, but rather one of legal complexity, leaving him lost. "Your mother's trust," murmured Olivia from the side, looking more than a little shaken. "Yes," I confirmed, turning to acknowledge my daughter for the first time. "I established this trust to safeguard her inheritance. As the trustee, I have to manage and protect these assets as per a legal obligation." I locked eyes with Olivia, letting the silence of the room highlight my words. As I glanced around the chaotic living room, littered with beer cans and discarded pizza boxes, I thought to myself how holding a weeks-long, free-for-all party for 30 people is irresponsible and legally risky. Then, looking over to the composed Tanaka family, I mentioned how leasing the house for $120,000 makes far more sense. It was the right move to make. Damien, on the other hand, seemed to be on shaky ground, like he'd taken a leap only to find himself in deep water, flailing as he tried to figure out what to do next. "This is insane. You can't just do this," he spluttered. "This is a family issue." He took a last shot by turning to his wife, his voice laced with desperation. "Olivia, back me up. Your dad's out of line. He can't just toss us out like this." The power dynamic shifted right then. Suddenly, Damien wasn't the big shot. He was a guy in a bind, seeking support from Olivia in what was looking like a lost cause. Every pair of eyes in the room, his friends, the Tanakas, and Leo, shifted their gaze to Olivia, who was clearly stressed, caught between the rage of her husband and the calm, steady demeanor of her father. Damien, feeling cornered and desperate, turned to Olivia as his seemingly last resort. "Olivia, say something," he pleaded, almost breaking down. "This is your home too. Tell him he can't do this." Olivia held my gaze, her expression a cocktail of fear and startling clarity. She opened her mouth to speak, but before a single word escaped, a sharp new voice suddenly shattered the tension in the room. "Actually, she can't." The voice chimed in from the doorway, and there stood Evelyn Reed, a real powerhouse in the business arena. Imagine her in a sharp gray suit, sleek leather briefcase in hand, exuding this unshakable confidence that grabs everyone's attention in the room. She was my ace in the hole, the perfect curveball to change the game. Leo caught her eye and gave a nod, clearly a part of their prearranged plan. He dialed her up the minute things started going sideways, exactly as we figured. Evelyn walked in, her heels clicking with purpose on the wooden floor. She didn't pay any mind to the chaos or Damien's group hanging around. Her focus locked solely on Damien and Olivia. "Apologies for cutting in," she stated plainly, making it obvious she didn't mean it. "I'm Evelyn Reed, representing the Carroll Miller Family Trust." Damien looked up at her in shock. "What? Another lawyer? Is this a setup?" Still, Evelyn brushed him aside, instead turning her attention to Olivia. Her voice didn't lose its firmness, but she softened it just a touch. "Olivia," she said, "your husband thinks you have a legal right to stay. He's mistaken, and I believe you know the reason." Olivia turned a shade paler, more ghost-like as realization dawned. She shook her head, a weak effort to push back the truth. "Let me remind you," Evelyn pressed on, fishing out a smart-looking document from her briefcase. It was the agreement about the money gifted and asset protection. "You signed this contract 2 years ago, Olivia. Remember it?" Evelyn continued like a teacher driving home a hard lesson. "Remember when your dad handed you and Damien that $250,000 cashier's check for your place in town?" She let that sizable amount hang in the air, a solid $250,000. Damien's crew exchanged nervous glances, the weight of generosity and their own avarice now clearly laid bare. "This document," Evelyn moved forward, her speech becoming precise and cutting, "was a completely logical condition to that gift. Your father didn't just hand over such a large amount, of course, without ensuring there were conditions. He dished out that huge chunk of change, plus he put his own reputation on the line by co-signing the mortgage, accepting a financial burden just because he stepped in." Evelyn's gaze slid to Damien, suddenly as cold as ice. When someone puts their resources on the line like that, they take legal precautions to shield their assets, especially from financial missteps. That's what savvy estate planning is about. She angled back towards Olivia. "You put your ink on a document that was crystal clear. It acknowledged your receipt of that cool $250,000. And in return for accepting that money, you knowingly relinquished any future use and occupancy rights to your father's main property, owned by the trust. In layman's terms, Olivia, you exchanged your right to stay here for a hefty $250,000 sum. That was a blow delivered with scalpel-like precision." The silence ringing through the room almost drowned out the ocean's roar. It laid out the unvarnished truth of the whole deal. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment revenge plot. Oh no, it was a meticulously crafted, long-form consequence put together with intention. Damien and Olivia had tripped over their own greed, eager to grab my money without even a peek at the small print. Their cluelessness sealed their eviction notice. Damien turned to Olivia, a mix of shock and hurt written all over his face. "You signed this. Never even told me," he murmured, his voice thick with disbelief. Olivia just stood there, tears brimming, unable to speak. Their shady partnership now lay in ruins. The allure of quick cash had them so blinded they walked into their own trap, one I helped set. I gave them just enough rope, and they willingly tied their own snare. Evelyn Reed snapped her briefcase shut, like the sound of a gavel coming down. Game over. The silence that followed her devastating announcement was the most profound that house had known, a silence dense with broken illusions and the razor-sharp precision of the plan. Damien stood there, unable to move, his face a mix of shock and burning rage. His friends, normally a lively crowd hanging on his every word, now seemed like a bunch of startled deer caught in headlights. Their eyes darted nervously between Damien, Evelyn, and the exit, clearly weighing their escape options. Olivia, meanwhile, had collapsed into an armchair nearby, silently crying as she stared at the document Evelyn held as if it were a coiled viper ready to bite. As Evelyn finished her speech, right on cue, 2 big guys in dark suits casually walked through the open door. They didn't have that stern cop vibe, nor did they look like those bouncers you see at clubs. Their relaxed yet assertive demeanor suggested they were here not for a brawl, but to protect someone important, a clear sign everything had changed. Leo, always the professional, stepped forward. "Mr. Carter," he said, using a tone that barely left room for discussion, "this is our security team. They're here to ensure a smooth transition for the new tenants. They'll politely help you and your group gather your things." This public shaming was the bitter cherry on top. Damien, who thrived on confidence and control, now found himself being handled like a misbehaving student. After what felt like an eternity, he snapped out of his stupor, his face contorted by a last-ditch surge of anger. "Escort me? No one's escorting me anywhere!" he yelled, lunging at Leo. Instantly, one of the guards stepped in front of him, not even needing to touch him. The guard was a walking wall of calm determination. "Sir," the guard said in a deep, emotionless voice, "please gather your belongings now. Let's not make this harder than it has to be." The guard's polite approach was more unsettling than any threat, making it crystal clear that Damien wasn't even worth arguing with anymore. He was now just an item on a checklist needing a tick. His anger was like water crashing against a mountain of stone, completely useless. He looked to his friends, hoping for backup. Glancing around frantically, Damien searched for allies in his impromptu rebellion. But none of his friends joined him. They were already rushing to pack up, fear and shame written all over their faces. They wouldn't even meet his gaze, their loyalty as shallow as their respect. Just like that, they scattered, like rats deserting a ship not just sinking, but long since sunk. As they hurriedly collected their things, weighed down by embarrassment, my attention turned to Olivia. To her, the chaos of her husband's removal was nothing more than background noise to her own silent breakdown as she sat there. The denial she clung to had finally dissolved, leaving her to face the mess she'd played a part in creating. Her tears weren't for the ruined getaway or public shame. They came from a place of profound realization. You could see it as her eyes ping-ponged between the contract she signed, her husband being shown the door like an unwanted guest, and then finally to me. Right then, she understood the whole scenario. The fat check she eagerly accepted, the legal papers she blindly signed, the countless times she'd tolerated Damien's rude demeanor, including the last dismissive whatever on the phone. This wasn't a penalty handed down by her father. It was a consequence she brought upon herself. She looked at me, face wet with tears, and whispered in a voice barely there, "I'm so sorry, Dad," she murmured, just loud enough to be heard. "I'm really sorry." It was the first genuine thing she'd said in a long while. Before I could respond, Damien was being guided out, arms full of hastily grabbed clothes. He stopped by Olivia's chair. "Liv, let's go," he barked in a voice trying to fake authority but sounding pitiful instead. "Come on, we're leaving." But Olivia didn't move. She simply shook her head, burying her face in her hands, her sobs now clearly audible. She wasn't going with him. The fantasy shattered. She finally saw him as he was. Not a strong, confident man, but a greedy, hollow child. His expression fell apart, like the whole world crashed down on him. In that instant, he lost more than just a free trip. He lost his partner, his confidant, his wife. He was utterly on his own now. Soon enough, all his buddies zoomed off in their cars, eager to leave behind the mess that was their leader's downfall. The security guard stood by as Damien, looking defeated, tossed his stuff into his truck. The loud roar of the engine marked his sorry farewell. He drove off, a solitary figure. With Damien gone, a profound hush enveloped the house. It was as though even the walls sighed in relief. Olivia sat quietly in the armchair, her sobs subdued into gentle, hiccup-like breaths. The security team had quietly departed. Leo and Evelyn whispered softly by the door, discussing the final details. Meanwhile, I headed to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and handed it to my daughter. Her hand shook as she took it, eyes swollen and red, avoiding mine. "Sorry, Dad," she murmured again, voice raw and broken. I didn't realize. I sat opposite her, not to console, but to finally speak the truth. "This was never just about the house, Olivia," I said gently but firmly. "These walls are just materials, wood, glass, stone. It was about the respect you show me and the way you honor your mother's memory, which your husband, and by extension you, disregarded." She flinched, but stayed silent. She understood deep down. "I love you, Olivia," I continued. "You are my daughter. But love doesn't mean you get unrestricted access to a person's inner soul. Respect is the key that grants you space in someone's life. Your husband paid nothing and felt entitled to everything. That's not how life operates." I stood, giving her the decision to make. "My door is always open to you, my daughter," I added, softening my tone. "But the next step is yours to take, alone, and with the respect you've neglected." With that, I left, letting her grapple with her future, a future she now had to shape on her own. By evening, the house was immaculate and calm once more. Leo's thoroughness was truly remarkable. Every trace of the chaotic gathering was gone, leaving. I eventually found myself out on the back patio, at the spot where everything had begun, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The storm was a thing of the past. Out of nowhere, I sensed someone nearby and glanced over to spot Mr. Tanaka standing quietly beside me. We stood there, silently absorbing the close of the day. After a while, he broke the silence, saying, "Your home is truly wonderful," his words warm with sincerity. "Your wife must have been a remarkable person." I gazed at the waning light, a genuine smile breaking through the first all day. "She really was," I answered. "Everything I did today was to protect what she left behind, not just the structure, but its spirit." Mr. Tanaka nodded, his eyes showing true understanding. "A house of mere wood and stone. Well, that's just a shell," he said, with wise calmness. "But when it's filled with respect and memories, that's when it becomes a true home." He was spot on with that. As the sun fully dipped beneath the waves, a deep sense of tranquility washed over me. The chaos had passed, disrespect addressed. My wife's legacy stood untouched, order restored, not through anger, but with understanding. A father's fierce yet tender love reclaiming its rightful place. I'd always figured that keeping family peace meant brushing off insults quietly, but this was a revelation. True peace isn't about running from conflict, it's about drawing clear, firm boundaries. The biggest endeavor for an engineer isn't building from steel and concrete, but crafting a life rooted in self-respect. My actions weren't driven by vengeance, but by a quiet duty to uphold the legacy my wife and I built. And I came to see that sometimes a father's strongest love is shown when he imparts the hard lessons of living with the consequences of one's actions.